Lindsay's coming.
Perfect. All right. All right. I would like to call to order the April 15th, 2024 regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Phelps-Clifton Springs School District. Pam, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The Phelps-Clifton Springs Central School District Board of Education meets publicly to conduct its business in accordance with the law. The public is invited to observe these proceedings, but is not entitled to respond or disrupt them, especially when such disturbances run counter to the district's code of conduct and the welcoming spirit of our district. The public is reminded of the context of board meetings. Board members are volunteers, audience members are visitors to school grounds, and students and staff's well-being is at the heart of board operations. Visitors are reminded of the courage it takes to speak up as members of the community and the importance of encouraging civic and civil engagement. The board strives to hear all community voices during its public meetings in a safe, respectful, and orderly manner. The behavior that we expect of all students in our classrooms is also expected from visitors at board meetings. In an effort to ensure that community members' concerns are heard, the board reminds speakers to address the board in a civil manner, refrain from discussing specific personnel or students, limit outbursts, and limit unnecessary noise. The board encourages an atmosphere of respect and tolerance and strict adherence to its code of conduct. All right, roll call.
Lynn Liebrecht, board member.
Lindsay Marino, board member.
Mike Dorr, board member.
Heather Rockefeller, board member.
Deb Gallagher, board member.
Carl DeBosch, business administrator.
Nick Ganster, superintendent.
Tracy Altman, board member.
Pamela Mann, district clerk.
Can I get a motion to adjourn into, or not adjourn, go into executive session for the purpose of discussing matters related to the employment history and discipline of a particular person?
A motion.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, I'd like to reconvene the meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carried. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through F as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the consent agenda items A through F as presented, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. All right, presentations. Mr. Godfrey?
Folks, how you doing? Joe Godfrey here. So thank you guys for all coming out tonight at the last minute. So just a couple words about the role of music here at Mid Lakes and in
Joe, if you could use the mic, just so then the recording has your voice on it, that would be awesome.
Okay. There. So we're very fortunate to have a very great program here at Mid Lakes. We're very well supported by the admin here. I wrote just a couple notes. Music is an art worthy of study on its own merits. We don't need to be justified because it has connections to math or science or anything else. Music has its own ground, and it's valuable in our society. These kids, we've connected big time lately. Kids, I think I just had one of my favorite gigs a couple weeks ago. The day after our concert, we played for our friends in MEC, and those kids were popping. They were jumping all around the auditorium, and they were dancing, and I think our jazz band kids really just loved playing for those kids. One of my other favorite gigs I ever did was a couple years ago at Christmas time at a nursing home, playing for my wife's grandfather. So guys, music is service as well. It's entertainment, it's fun, it's meaningful, it connects us with each other, but it's also service to your community. So I'm very blessed to have these kids in my life and be a part of this district. So thank you for having us here. We're gonna do 3 numbers tonight. Sydney, now speaking of music, crosses generations. Sydney's here with her mom. They're going to play a quick duet. And Becky used to be my student years ago as well. And Becky was she went to Conference All-State years ago, which is the top band in New York State. So we're real lucky to have Sydney here playing with her mom. And how cool is that to play music with your kids? So we're going to do 1 duet with these guys, and then jazz band's going to play 2 quick numbers. Okay.
Awesome.
All right, so let's bring guys, come on up here. Let's bring the saxes over. All right. So these guys meet on Mondays, club status there, but certainly, jazz education is a big part of their life here. We got a couple guys, Brian and Carter are going to take some improvised solos. I guess I'll take one too, right? So we'll go 1, 2, 3. So we're going to play a piece called Fast Blues. So everybody go ahead and blow one note real quick. jazz band for the first time today. These kids are, we're so lucky, the kids are also in sports and so much going on, so our regular full-time drummer had games tonight, so Chris, thanks for stepping in today at the last minute, so appreciate it. All right, we're gonna play one more for you guys. This is called Blue Monk, by the pianist named Thelonious Monk, and he was a big figure in jazz, and so Blue Monk for you guys, okay? Ready? Lynn's take it first. And we got Carter on a double solo, and then Brian on a double solo. Ready? 1, 2, 3, this. Thanks for having us here. What a blessing this job is. Count it blessings. This is why I get out of bed every day.
Can you have the kids introduce themselves?
Yeah, how about that, man?
I'm Landon Archer.
I'm Brian Cannon.
I'm Greg Grishaw.
Cindy Rodriguez. Anita Mofficer.
I'm old man Joe Godfrey.
My name is Chris Finley.
Awesome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
So if I was a student in jazz band, I would so much look forward to Mondays. They wouldn't be a dread. I'd be like, I got jazz band today, because to end a day like that, like enjoying music, that's awesome. I love it.
I enjoy it. Sometimes it's hard to do, you know. So, well, thank you guys. We're going to just shuffle this stuff out and we'll do that in a second. Thanks for having
Awesome.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah, bring everything out the store, guys. We're out here, and we'll get it out of here.
Absolutely.
I might click on it a couple times just to mess with you.
All right. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
Carl and Mr. Ganser for our budget presentation. Draft number 3.
All right, folks, thank
Third
you
and
once
final?
again for our third and our final budget presentation prior to our May budget hearing tonight. So without further ado, I'd like to just go through the slides and move through our budget presentation so we can land on our final numbers for our the board approving the budget later tonight. So a quick agenda. This agenda is almost half the size of the previous agenda because about a month ago on March 18th, we went through general support, we went through operations and maintenance, we went through transportation, we went through health benefits, we went through the ERS and TRS, or employees retirement system and teachers retirement system. Today it's much more broad because we landed on a 2.71% tax levy increase, and today's meeting was all about finding efficiencies and bringing that number down to land on a final number. So as we go over this agenda, we're going to do a quick recap of where we were during the March 18th presentation, and we're going to talk about where we found some efficiencies, especially in the area of expenditures. We're then going to compare those two gaps, thus arriving at our tax levy increase, and look at what it approximately means on a $100,000 assessment based on our across our 7 different municipalities. We're going to once again revisit our Mid-Lakes tax levy history to see where we currently are in terms of our tax cap, and then finally revisit the ballot propositions just like we have in every other presentation. So on March 18th, when we compared the expenditures and the revenue, when we compared both sides of the budget, what we needed was in the amount of $419,189, or more like 2.71% tax levy increase in order to close the budget between expenditures and projected revenue. This was done based on already tightening the budget in the areas of health insurance, in the areas of operations and maintenance, transportation, general support. So we had already begun the process of tightening the budget because just like we were one of the few districts, or the smaller percent of districts that actually received an increase in state aid, but much lesser than we had in prior years. I just want to revisit that 45% of districts across the state had governor's projection called for lesser state aid than they had in previous years. So we weren't in that position, but we weren't in a position like we were in 2 years ago, so we had to start the process of tightening the budget as we move forward year over year. So in that process, we came up with 2.71%, or needing $419,189. I just want to revisit the projected revenue from the March 18th presentation because nothing has changed since the March 18th presentation. Back in January, when the governor's projections came out, all the signs were pointing to a delayed budget. And here we are on April 15th and the state budget hasn't passed. We were well aware that with Easter Sunday being on April 1st, it was going to take at least into mid-April. While we were hopeful the state budget would pass after the governor's projections, most people predicted it was going to be quite a fight between different parties to try to arrive in a state budget. We're hearing that as of Friday, in principle, they've agreed to most things in the state budget, but there's still some fine-tuning that has to take place. So it might take till the end of this week or Monday of the 22nd until which they approve a state budget. Once again, we're hopeful. Here's what we're hearing. We're hearing that at the state level, when it comes to districts that were projected lesser state aid, where the governor kind of took the gloves off of the Save Harmless agreement, we're hearing that those districts may be made whole. So compared to 2 years ago, those districts may get the same exact amount they got 2 years ago in state aid, so a $0 increase. But for districts like ourselves that received an increase, they're not projecting anything additional because one of the things they cannot arrive on, or they cannot close the budget gap on, is to take into account the inflationary factor of 4.12% on the foundation aid formula. So at best, we will get that number, $1,185,130 increase in state aid year over year, which once again, we are incredibly fortunate for. So I wanted to put that number up there to show that there's no changes since March 18th, or more importantly, to show that there's no changes since the governor's projections back in January. All right? So the only thing that we have essentially reduced in our budget, like we discussed on March 18th, is the general education and other services. When we talk about other services, we talk about teacher salaries, we talk about teacher aide salaries, we talk about teaching assistant salaries. But within that, we also talk about a plethora of BOCE services, whether that's occupational ed or many other services, such as we recently notified that our sub-calling service, BOCES was no longer going to provide the service for the substitute caller when it came to doing certain administrative work. They were charging us $6 per child. Now multiply that by 1,500 students, and all of a sudden we are able to save $9,000, by bringing that service in-house. So BOCE services in regards to sub-callers, BOCE services in regards to instructional technology, that between the Director of Curriculum and Instruction and the Director of Professional Development and Innovation, they were able to find some efficiencies in that area. BOCE services in terms of ERIE 1 finance and legislation that we no longer need. When you start adding up those dollar amounts and some other instructional services when it comes to staff training, when we added up all those dollar amounts, we arrived at $43,311. I like something Mr. Ganster said as I was discussing this number with him. He said this is a reduction in services, not in student support. So it's not, these reductions are not hurting our students in the classroom. These reductions are some services we had that we no longer need. And hence we can tighten the budget in that area without feeling the effects in the classroom. So that's the number. We were able to reduce it by $43,311. As we look to the next screen of what does that mean to compare the gap. 2 slides ago, we were at about $419,000. Now we need a tax levy increase of $375,878. What does that equate to? That equates to about 2.43% on a tax levy increase. I want to point out, this slide and the slides that we've had have only talked about the increase. I just want to reiterate, folks, because you'll see this during the May budget hearing, our tax levy is currently $15.47 million. So that's how much we collect from our 7 different municipalities, is $15.47 million. What will we be asking them for approximately? It's 15.47 plus another 375,878, which gets us to about 15.84 million. That's what we're looking to collect from our 7 municipalities in order to close our budget, or a 2.43% tax levy increase. What does that look like for the average household? During the last budget presentation on March 18th at 2.71%. When you take into account last year's assessment, last year's equalization rates across our 7 different municipalities, for a person on a $100,000 assessment, without STAR, they would see an average increase of $79.81. With STAR, $59.57, or enhanced STAR, $25.07. As a result of reducing that number to 2.43, you have the new numbers of $71.57, $53.42, and $22.48 respectively. And every individual falls into one of those 3 buckets: without STAR, with STAR, and with enhanced STAR. Before we go ahead, that's essentially everything we had to discuss in terms of our presentation. I can revisit the 5 ballot propositions in a minute. I'm happy to do so. Well, actually, no, that's on the next slide. We talk about our tax levy history. So once again, the red line. The red line is what we call a tax cap. Most people are always under the impression that since about 2012 that the tax cap is 2%. The tax cap is not 2%. The inflation factor they allow you to take is either 2% or inflation, whichever one's lower. So in this case, inflation was at 4.12%. The inflation factor that the state sets is 2%. And they say you have to take the lower one. So we have to use the 2% as a multiplier in our formula. That formula is an 8 or 10-step formula. That formula, year after year, helps us arrive at the red line. The red line, or the dot for this year, is 4.73%. which means if we were one of the struggling districts around us who were getting a shortfall in state aid, you better believe those districts are going out at that cap or at that red line of 4.73. Just like us, if those districts go out at the cap, they need a 50% voter authority in order to approve their budgets. We are going out under the cap at roughly 51% of the tax cap, or 2.43%. That's at least what's being proposed tonight. And once again, we would also require a 50% voter authority in order to pass our school budget. So just like I was mentioning, we've got our 5 ballot propositions to approve later tonight, along with the school budget. We've got our annual budget this year in the amount of $46,142,958. We've got the expenditures of $1,073,880 for the purchase of 6 school buses. And I had mentioned, you'll notice later in the agenda and the executive content, I had mentioned 6 school buses and 1 Suburban. I changed that to 1 utility vehicle because as I thought more about it, a Suburban is a type of vehicle. It's not necessarily the kind of vehicle. So 6 buses and 1 utility vehicle. Creating a transportation capital reserve with a max allocation of $5 million. 2 separate proposition for the 2 libraries, and then finally the election of 3 board members. So our next steps, of course, once again, are for the board to approve the budget tonight. We've got a budget hearing on May 8th and the annual budget vote on May 21st. But I want to just stop right now and see if any of you folks had any questions comparing where we were on March 18th to where we are today on April 15th. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
finding those little bits to bring it down that little bit more. And just to be clear, so like not every district's tax cap is 4.73, right? That
Not
depends-
every district's
right.
cap
So-
is 4.73%. Thank you for pointing that out.
'Cause
There are
it kind
districts.
of- when you were talking, it
Yeah.
almost sounded like, but it's not.
No,
that's
thank
not
you for
every
saying that.
district.
That's for our
ours,
district.
Based
Our
on
district, our calculations.
8-step.
Yes, yes,
Right,
based
yeah,
on what,
okay.
whenever we go, I'm glad you brought that up. Whenever each year, our blue line, each year except for 2 years in the last decade, our blue line has been underneath our red line. What does that allow us to do? In next year's tax cap formula, do you notice the difference or the gap? We get to carry over a portion of that money, the leftover money, because we did not go all the way up to the red line. So any carryover, we're allowed to calculate that in our formula next year. A portion of it, not dollar for dollar. So we've got carryover, we've got 2%, we've got a community growth factor that we get to factor into next year's formula, and hence next year's formula will most likely look different. But all those numbers are strictly for Phelps-Clifton Springs. Thanks
Right.
for
Yeah.
saying that. Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's just, when you were talking, it was almost sounded
Sure.
like every district has a 4.73,
Nope,
but that's
just
not,
us.
that's just ours.
Just
Yes.
us.
Okay, just wanted to clarify
There
that.
may be another district out
Well,
there, but
right.
at least as far as I know, just us. Yeah.
All right, anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, superintendent's report.
Okay,
Mr. Ganster.
we are light on the presentations tonight, but I have a number of report items, so I'm gonna do my best to do a thorough job, but also keep it moving, all right? So, the first thing to talk about is the meeting on April 24th. It is the BOCE's budget vote. By regulation, we have to hold that meeting on that day in order to take action to vote for the proposed BOCE's budget for next school year. It came to my attention that there was a conflict with the National Junior Honor Society induction ceremony. That's at 6 p.m. Our meeting starts at 6:30 p.m. and there are a couple board members who have children who are being inducted into the Junior Honor Society. So I did a quick round of communication today with the board. We are going to publicize and commence with that meeting at 5:30. It'll be a quick meeting with a single action item, and then members of the board can head over to the Junior Honor Society induction ceremony. So for the record, 5:30 p.m., not 6:30 p.m. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep. All right. On tonight's agenda, there is a subtle revision to next year's instructional calendar. And what that is by contract in our faculty association contract, if the district does not use any emergency closure days, so say a snow day or a power outage or a water main break, any of those scenarios that make us close school for an emergency fashion, if we don't use any of those, per contract, we have to give back 1 day surrounding Memorial Day weekend. So that being said, it hasn't happened in over 10 years, all right? So there was really no precedent for how to handle this. And I've probably spent way too much time on trying to identify past practice, make sure that I follow the recipe or the playbook, but to no avail. So we are going to set a new playbook, all right? So here's what I'd like to do. For 24-25, we added an asterisk at the bottom of the calendar that simply says, if no emergency closures are used during the 24-25 school year, then Friday, May 23rd, will be a holiday/recess for all faculty or all staff and students. So it's very clear, it's adopted by the board. So then if we have this scenario 1 year from now, all we have to do is communicate it out, okay? There's no formal action or anything like that. But given the fact that in this year's calendar, we don't have that, what I would like to do is add an action item at our next board meeting that simply says that the board approves for this school year for us to have Friday the 24th, I believe it is this year. I haven't looked at the calendar for this year in a while, but it's the Friday before Memorial Day, and then that would be a holiday for all faculty and staff. Now, I think it's important that we take formal action because it's a day that we said we were going to have school, but now all of a sudden we're not having school, and I think it's important for the community to know that I'm not just making it up as I go along, that there's oversight with the board and that we are, following the contracts that we have here in the district. All right, so we'll have an action item for this school year in a future board meeting, and we will anticipate the possibility for next year by revising the calendar, all right? Oh, yep. And one of the devils that's in the details here is in the Faculty Association contract, it says if no emergency closure days are used by May 15th, okay? So there's still the possibility for this school year, knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen, but that we have some sort of emergency closure before then. And if that's the case, then we wouldn't have that Friday off, right? So it's only in the case that we don't use them. Now, I wanted to talk about it tonight because I think it's important that we get the word out so people can anticipate it, but there won't be a formal and official decision, right, until May 15th, if that makes sense. So I wanted to make sure we get the word out because our community members have to make plans for childcare because not everybody lives every moment of the school calendar in their professional life. They have other occupations that bring them to work that day, and they may need childcare. So I wanted to make sure we get ahead of that. All right.
Can
The
I
next
just
thing.
ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
What's the date of our May meeting?
May 8th.
Yep.
Okay.
So
this is something we would approve, like, via our other avenues for discussion. The board would
Yeah, it'll
approve
be
it.
a new business item, and the resolution will just simply say for the 23-24 school year, if no emergency closure days are used by May 15th.
Gotcha, okay.
So it'll also anticipate it. It'll be before the 15th, but it'll be if. It'll be conditional on the if that makes sense. That answer your question? Okay, awesome. All right, so the next item for me is our Aquatic Center project. I made a significant omission from our last presentation, and that omission was this, that we are aided back. Once the board approves the project as an emergency project, we will receive state building aid back over the next 15 years to cover 87% of the expenditure. So if we, or when, the board approves us to set aside the $2.5 million, If we were to expend all $2.5 million for the project, then after 15 years is said and done, the true cost to the district is approximately $327,000. So the $2.5 million figure, it's a large amount of money. But in the end, in order to keep our infrastructure up and running, the state incentivizes that by giving us that aid back. And it would be 15 years of equal installments, I believe. Right, Carl?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I just wanted to make sure that that was said. There are some new business items related to the pool tonight. The first one is when you do a construction project, you have to run what's called a state environmental quality review. And that's to make sure that the project doesn't have any sort of significant negative impacts to the environment. So say we're an entity wanted to build something on a wetland, right? So you would have to go through this process to ensure that we're not doing anything that's against environmental law, and that we wouldn't have any negative impacts. Now, because this project is within the envelope of the current building and it's an existing system, it was a pretty quick seeker, is what is the acronym, SEQR. So there are no negative environmental impacts. Nevertheless, we do need to formally say that there are no environmental impacts per the seeker. And that's one of the resolutions for the pool tonight. The second one is the resolution that the board declares the pool as an emergency project and allows us to set aside the $2.5 million. And then the third one is an agreement with the architect that says we're going to do business with Edge Architecture for this project. So those are the three new business items related to the pool. Okay, now, any questions with the pool? I want to make sure I give an opportunity for that.
How long was it gonna be shut down for?
So it depends on how it all works out, right? So there are three portions to the project. There's the dehumidification unit on the roof, there's the resurfacing of the pool, and then there's the filtration system. If all three of those were allowed to happen simultaneously, the closure will be much shorter. But if all three of those happen at distinctly different times, it's possible that the pool would need to be shut down in three different periods of time. Each of the projects themselves, and I don't want to put a date on it because we haven't really talked in a great detail over that, but the resurfacing of the pool, according to the pool contractor that we spoke with, said it's in the neighborhood of 2 weeks to a month. So each portion is in that sort of amount of time. So don't hold me to this because these are very preliminary estimates, but it could be, if everything happens at the same time, a month. But if it happened sequentially, it could be up to a few months, depending on. All right. Okay. Other questions related to the pool? All right. So policy committee, we have a meeting on the 24th, which we all agreed to bump that early as well because of what we talked about with the Honor Society induction ceremony. But we do have our first draft of our updated policy manual in hand from Erie One BOCES. They have a recommended process for reviewing that. And what the policy committee will do is we will look at that review process, look at that first draft at the next meeting, and decide, and this will be news to the policy committee, but Erie One does recommend that on certain policies, we gather feedback from other people who are closer to the work. So if it has to do with athletics, perhaps we would bring in Mr. Lombardi. If it has something to do with, and I'm just picking random topics, animals in the classroom, right? We might pull in our principals to talk about what that might look like. So the work might take us a little bit longer than anticipated, but we have that first draft. Once we get through that review, we'll kick it back to Erie One. They will make those updates and they'll kick it back to us again for a second review. And then after that second review, they'll review it again and then tell us that it's ready for adoption. And then we would move forward with the adoption
And
process.
so it would be adopting the whole thing all at once.
Adopting the entire thing.
Got it.
Because one of the policies that we're reviewing is the manner in which we adopt policies, if that makes sense. So we can write into that policy that after this review process that we can adopt the entire manual in one fell swoop. And that's a way to make this a more efficient process than how we were handling it earlier
We
this year.
won't have to read through every single 800 policies.
Correct.
At a meeting to have them approved.
No, that would take very long.
Yeah,
That would be a
that's
very
nice.
long time. Yeah. So more to come after the policy committee meets. All right. United Way, so I'm happy to report and so thankful that after our United Way campaign, the community donated, what we were able to donate to the United Way was $3,360. There was an additional $500 that was donated that went to Malo scholarships. So in total, between Malo and United Way, we were at $3,860 in terms of donations, which is well above and beyond the price point that I put on me jumping into the pool, and then also now being hit with that color fun run stuff that's blue. So we'll be having that spectacle this Friday during Eagle Time. So we'll have some fun with that. So with the silliness aside, I think it's important to recognize that the work comes back. So the United Way also donated back to the school district $500, and that was with the express intent of using that money to work through some initiatives we have with providing meals to families in need over our February and spring breaks. And, we've had conversations administratively that, Thanksgiving and Christmas roll around and there's tons of canned food drives and meal drives. But when you get into the spring, there are very few. So we made a very concerted effort to do those food drives and make sure our families in need are taken care of. And I think it's important, two key players that I'd like to highlight by name, despite it being a true team effort, are Margot and Jill Swarthout in our food services department. They do a ton of work behind the scenes to make sure that this all happens. So thank you, Margot, and thanks to Jill. All right, moving on. I told you I have a lot, so I still have a whole page and a little bit. I'm also happy to report that the state released graduation rates for all schools across New York State. They give graduation rates in two different ways. They do a comprehensive district graduation rate that factors in all students, no matter where they are, because we do send some students out to outside placements, right? So we have a district rate, and then we have just the middle high school rate, right, for only the students that attended the middle high school. For 2023, the class of 2023, the district rate was 94%. And the middle high school rate was 95%. And those are some really tremendous numbers. When I reflect on graduation rate, especially as a building principal, I would envision a class of 20 kids. And when you're at, say, an 80% graduation rate, that's 4 students in a class of 20. And, you have to ask yourself, is that the kind of school we want to have where we have 4 kids out of 20 not making it across the stage? And I would say, no, that's not the kind of school you want to have. So when you get to 90%, you're talking about 1 out of 20. When you get to 95%, you're talking about a half of a student per 20. So that's 1 kid out of 40. And that's a really amazing thing to see. I think it's important to recognize that graduation doesn't just happen at high school. The pursuit of graduation happens from pre-K on, and it's a true collective effort of the entire system. So there's tons to celebrate and tons to be proud of. I will say that's a lofty number, and we're going to have to work very hard to maintain that number. So I'm excited for that work. And I think that conversation segues nicely into an MOA that's in our new business section tonight. There's an MOA with the Faculty Association surrounding what we're going to call instructional council. There is language in our Faculty Association contract that talks about 2 different groups, PDC, which is Professional Development Committee, and DCC, which is District Curriculum Committee. Now, the membership of those 2 committees doesn't really involve our department leadership. All right, so it's a volunteer basis. So what you end up with is you have department leaders working with principals at that level for department type things. Then you have a professional development committee with a different membership and a curriculum committee with a third membership, all kind of working in pockets and not, so there's no streamline or alignment between those 3 groups. So we worked with the Faculty Association leadership and drafted some new guidelines on how we would work together as a team that really streamlines those 3 groups. And what that does is it allows us to be more integrated, more efficient with communication, more efficient with the types of meetings we have, give meaning to each meeting that we hold and purpose, because time is a commodity that's hard to come by in schools, you know, for collaboration. So I'm excited to give it a try. It's a 1-year MOA, and that's because we might learn that that language is incomplete, insufficient, or not good. You know, sometimes when you try something new, you find out that it didn't work as intended. So it's a 1-year trial, and if things look good, we'll assess the efficacy of what we were able to pull off through that MOA. If it's good, we'll reapprove it and possibly anticipate a more permanent change in the next round of contract negotiations. And if it's not good, we could always revert back to the original language and try something else. So I'm excited about that MOA, and I think it's going to yield some nice things in order for us to tie it back to graduation rate, in order for us to continue to work on and streamline strategic plan initiatives, plans for excellence, and also the state mandated improvement things with our current 7th and 8th grade ELA and math students with disabilities. So excited for that. All right. So also tied to this is that our 3 through 8 state testing is now in full swing. We have our 3rd and 7th graders have completed their ELA tests. Our 4th and 8th are about halfway through their ELA tests. And then our 5th and 6th graders are slated for later this week. So we're excited to get the ELA portion taken care of. There's still a science test at grades 5 and grades 8 for our students to take. And then they have a math test for grades 3 through 8. All of that testing, what the principals have done is they've kind of drawn it out, so only one grade level is testing on any given day, and that allows the school to continue more normal operations as opposed to giving the tests to every single student in 1 or 2 days, right? So it sounds like a lot over a long period of time, but it's very select groups at any given moment, and that'll be anticipated to be complete by May 9th, all right? All right, and then the last thing, I feel like I've been talking forever, but the last thing is somewhat of an emotional thing. On tonight's agenda, you're going to see a memorial scholarship for Sarah Clyde, who was a member of the class of 2002, who was in a bad car accident days before graduation. She suffered a traumatic brain injury and subsequently passed away in 2014. So friends of her family, the Beidelmans, graduated with her mom and dad, Steve and Mary Clyde, who are class of 78 here in Mid-Lakes, the Beidelmans and the Clydes, class of 78. They're establishing a memorial scholarship for Sarah for a student who is pursuing a career in mathematics and values kindness. So it's pretty touching memorial scholarship. So we will vote to accept that, and then they'll give it annually $2,500. So pretty amazing. All right. And that does it for me. Any questions on anything that I just said, because I threw a lot at you? All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to board discussion topics. So everyone has the flyer for the May 16th annual four-county meeting. If you're interested in going, fill out your form and get it to Pam as soon as possible. I wish I could go. I have 3 other places to be that evening, a baseball game, a lacrosse game, and facilities committee, so I won't be able to make it, but hopefully somebody will be able to go and report back to us. I imagine, I did go to the one last year. They also had the New York State Teacher of the Year, last year's New York State Teacher of the Year speak, and it was an amazing presentation. So I think it's definitely one that's worth considering attendance at. So hopefully we can get somebody, at least one of us, to be able to attend. Annually, we do a staff luncheon at the end of the school year to, instead of doing each of the appreciation weeks, we do one appreciation for all staff. So I'm going to be calling around to get prices and get some information, so that we can kind of move forward with getting that planned and making a decision. So just so you know that that's happening. Committee reports. Lynn, have you, anything to report from Legislative Committee?
Yeah, we did meet on Saturday. Really, at this point, we're still working on the federal position paper. But also, a few members of our subcommittee are actually going to start going out to local assemblymen and Senate offices to kind of just meet people and discuss certain topics. So, moving forward.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. Connections. All right, and our policy committee meeting is coming up. We have a facilities committee meeting coming up. Any other committees? Trying to think if any other committees have met since we last met. I don't think so. The other piece, Mike and Nick and I were at the 4-County Annual Spring Conference. It was the afternoon speaker was a 3-hour block, and I thought, oh, that's a long time. But the time flew because he was very dynamic, and it was topic about school safety, so everyone is super interested in that topic, certainly. So it was a helpful day, I think, for all of us to just hear his perspective and all that he had to present. Mike, do you want to share a quick summary of the day? Anything you want to share?
Sections?
Any part you want to share?
The part that we all participated in at the beginning had to do with, again, school safety. Do we have a special events plan? They shared with us that schools have done a pretty good job of securing indoor activities, but outdoor activities tend to be a more vulnerable time. So they emphasized doing drills. Would a teacher coach know what to do, including bus drivers, ancillary staff? At sporting events, the coach can set the tone for the fans, and they emphasize that for better or worse. So that kind of led into what we did in the afternoon, which I'll get to in a minute. We broke out into smaller groups after that, and I'll just share quickly the things that I went to. The second session I went to was in regard to better boards. What are 5 things that boards can do? Set clear expectations, create conditions for success, accountability, holding the system accountable, build public will, and learn as a team. We talked about setting a tone in our culture. One of the things that I really liked, where representatives from districts were sharing something similar that we use, forms for special services that first ask about the students' strengths. What do the students do well? Instead of being just problem or issue oriented. And so even subtle, simple things like how our forms are worded can help set a tone. That being said, one of the things that stood out to me in that presentation was she asked a question: how many board members does it take to screw in a light bulb? Anybody want to take a shot? None. And the point was, we're not micromanagers. We trust the professionals in their roles, and then we help to oversee and support. After that, I went to a session on AI, which was kind of apocryphal, but it was interesting to hear the pros and cons of AI in school districts. Largely what they're focused on with the use of AI is teaching the students what's acceptable and what is not, because we still want them to be able to formulate thoughts and articulate them. So making sure that, that the staff and the students understand certain filters and limitations on AI. The good is they're useful for brainstorming, writing rough drafts, editing, formatting, summarizing, synthesizing, lesson plan generators. They said that a half hour of development, something in writing that we would do after hours or lesson planning or something, can take an AI about 3 minutes to do. So there's some positive uses of this for time management. The concerns were AI makes errors, false statements, takes a lot of their facts from the internet. It can become a shortcut around fundamental writing skills. Plagiarism of itself, so it'll search through its own data banks and lift stuff that it's already created. It's trained on topics, but then becomes biased or nonsensical. It creates more work of detection for the educators, and can zap some of the individual's personality out of their writing. So it's a juggling act right now, and it's still fairly new. So that was the session on AI. Then we came to the big one, which honestly is a little hard even to talk about. I think those of us involved needed to debrief and process for probably a good half hour, including one of our SROs. And we basically dissected a mass shooting in Florida. And there's no way I could possibly do this presentation justice, 3 hours of in-depth, just turning over every stone. It wasn't a blaming session, which was really nice. It was a, wow, what can we learn session. So just some of the highlights. What are we doing with our own threat assessment? And again, this is largely SRO driven, but what are the warning signs ahead of time? What are our staff seeing? And all staff. We're talking cafeteria, bus drivers. There's lots of people who can be eyes and ears for the safety of our district. Staff must know how to decrease target objectives. So they kept using the word target, and that's because of the dehumanization that happens on the part of the shooter. And so what are we doing to decrease potential targets preemptively and also in the heat of the chaos? And so that's a whole other level of training. Let's see. Signage for first responders was something they focused a lot on, because if the first responders come, they don't know where things are or what's happening in certain parts of the campus. We recently went around and in the last couple of years and changed all the numbers at the doors so that there would be a logical progression of how the numbers go around the buildings. But even other things, different departments, so to speak. And the other thing that was interesting, and this is the last thing I'll say, but as someone who has worked in the building quite a bit with through contract agencies, we've often talked about, well, if stuff's going on, out in the hallway, we're jumping out the window and running for the woods. I mean, that tends to be kind of a general thing that a lot of people will say when we're talking. But one of the things that the presenter emphasized and re-emphasized many times was that in a lockdown, 100% of kids behind locked doors and out of sight survive, which was really powerful. If there's any information that I didn't prepare for this really, but if there's information that would lead anybody else who is interested in this presentation to this gentleman's, he might have things online for all I know. I don't know. Maybe that we can make some of that available, some links or something. But it was very powerful, and I think we all were feeling it.
Yeah. And I think it was helpful for our SRO, one of our SROs, to be there as well and to hear it and have his perspective on things that were.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. It was impactful, definitely. And I attended one session about data and the role of the board and how we use data. And another session about the culture of leadership. So I think it was a good variety of topics that were offered for us to learn about and hear about. So hopefully we can get more attendance next year. So that's one of the topics we're going to talk about too, is on our Fort County official ballot, there's a membership survey. So I just wanted to go through the questions quick. One of the questions is, what topics or speakers would you like Fort County to offer in 24-25? So that would be for the meetings or the spring conference or any of the professional development opportunities that they offer. So are there any topics or speakers that anyone has ideas of that they would like to learn more about that Fort County could offer? Thoughts or ideas?
I mean, I think bringing back the topic of school safety every year can't hurt.
Right.
So I think that would probably be a key one.
So these surveys have to be by May 1st? Is that what it is? So if people can think, and if you think of other ideas, shoot me an email, get a hold of me, whatever, and I will add them to the list, and then I'll make sure I get them to Pam in time too. So, I don't know, I have a calendar in front of me. So if they have to be in by May 1st, if we can say by April 26th, if I can have your ideas, your thoughts, and then we can get that sent off. Another question.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
back
yep.
On the topic of the Fort County.
Yep.
This says Tuesday, May 16th, for the one with the music teacher who's coming in. I'm not sure.
May 16th, so Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
Yeah.
So is it supposed to be
Oh, I didn't even catch that. I was just looking at the 16th.
so is it Tuesday the 14th or is it Thursday the 16th?
Hmm.
I think it's Tuesday the 14th, if I remember right. We talked about it at the legislative committee. I'm pretty sure that's the date.
See how they got
Oh.
Tuesday the 16th on here?
So I only have one other thing going on that day. I see that.
So we'll have to get clarity on which
I
day
was
it
only
is,
looking
but
at the 16th.
you're
I didn't even pay
thinking
attention to
Tuesday?
the Tuesday part.
Pretty sure it's the 14th because I think we have a track meet that same day. I was looking at that earlier.
I would like to go. If it's the 16th, I can't, but if it's the 14th, I could.
Can you double check with that and let us know? Thanks. Thank you. I didn't catch that. Like I said, I was just looking at the 16th.
It's
I
the
didn't
pink
even-
glasses. It helps
Yes.
me see everything
It's a
better.
focus thing. I love it. I needed myself a
These
pair
are
of
my
pink
great glasses, by the way. Just I don't want everybody to think I'm a hippie or something.
So the next question is, anyone interested in sitting on a committee to organize the 2025 conference?
I'll do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Anyone else? Lynn, you had kind of a... Hmm? Potentially?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
Awesome. So 4 was questions or suggestions of topics and speakers for the conference. And then 5, would your district be interested in facilitating a student-led presentation or workshop at our 2025 conference? So if we have something that we want to highlight, that might be something to reach out. I'm thinking maybe the egg program or some music any program. See if anybody would be willing to present.
I would just say yes, and we'll figure out what we want to highlight
Figure
for
something.
Mid-Lakes. I think
Awesome.
it's an opportunity for us to highlight the district.
Thanks. And would a Saturday in early June work better for a four-county conference? This year it was on a Friday. I'm trying to remember what last year was. I think last year was on a Friday also. So the question is to increase participation, would a Saturday cause more people to be more likely to attend? So a Saturday in early June would that be better? Or is there a better day of the week or a better month, better time of year that would be more likely to get attendance? Anybody have ideas or suggestions?
I think Saturday would be easier, especially with just working. It's a little difficult sometimes for during the week.
Yeah, to take a day off and,
Yeah.
yeah. Anybody else concur or have thoughts? Saturday? And then we'll go back to question one. Do you have any suggestions on how the association should celebrate 50 years of service next year? So Four County will celebrate its 50th year of providing services to our Four County area. And they just wanted to ask if anybody had ideas or suggestions on how to celebrate that 50 years. Some of the ideas that came up at the meeting I was at were to have, geez, am I going to remember? So one was to have like a dinner celebration. I don't know. I feel like there were a bunch of partial ideas out there. If anybody has ideas of how to celebrate. There was a thought, one of the other thoughts was invite back people who've served on the boards in the past, see how far we could get past board members back. But if anybody has ideas of things they want to do to celebrate, let me know. Okay, I think that's it for board discussion. Yeah, okay, that's all I got. And so we're on to public comment. The Phelps-Clifton Springs Central School District Board of Education invites public comment at this time to those who have signed up in advance with the district clerk. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes or less. Written remarks may be provided to the board if time expires before a speaker completes their remarks. We ask individuals to state their name prior to comments and to provide the district clerk with their contact information for purposes of follow-up. Although the board will not respond directly to individual comments at this time, items brought to the attention of the board may be taken under consideration for future response, action, or follow-up with the speaker. Issues related to specific district students, whether positive, negative, or neutral, must be brought to the attention of the superintendent of schools privately in order to safeguard student privacy. The board reserves the right to terminate a speaker's comments if their comments are in excess of 2 minutes, are repetitive, or are not appropriate for discussion in an open public forum. All visitors are reminded to abide by the district code of conduct and to be respectful and courteous both as speakers and as audience members. We are a community focused on bettering public education for our students, some of whom may be present. Thank you. No one signed up. Okay, so we're on to new business. I tried to block some of the stuff, but some of it didn't make sense to block. So, if there are no objections, I would like to block items A and B. They both have to do with the budget and our property tax. Is there a motion to approve items A and B as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of items A and B as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed? Motion carried. All right, items C, D, and E all have to do with the pool project, the emergency pool project. Is there a motion to approve items C through E as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of items C through E as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed? Motion carried. Item F, the revised district calendar. So that's just the asterisk statement on the bottom. Is there a motion to approve the revised district calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Item G, transfer of funds. Is there a motion to approve the transfer of funds as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of item G as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed? Motion carried.
We're getting pretty good at this.
Item H, the intermunicipal agreement. Is there a, so this is for the tax collection. Is there a motion to approve item H as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of item H as presented, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. All right. Items I, J, and K. These are memorandums and agreements. Is there a motion to approve items A through K as presented? I, J, K. I through K. Oh, I through K, I, J, and K. Is there a motion to approve I, J, and K as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of items I, J, and K as presented, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carried. It's a lot of letters going on there. Item L, the Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES Cooperative Bid Resolution. Is there a motion to approve item L as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of item L as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed, motion carried. All right. Item M, the 4-county SBA official ballot. So can I get a motion for a yes vote on all items?
So moved. Yes.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of a yes vote for all the items, say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed, motion carried. Item N, the non-public school transportation requests. Is there a motion to approve item N as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of item N as presented, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carried. Items O and P, this has to do with the election inspectors. Is there a motion to approve items O and P as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of items O and P as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. Okay, item Q, the annualized hours for the transportation employees. Is there a motion to approve item Q as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of item Q as presented, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carried. R is the establishment of the scholarship that Mr. Ganster mentioned earlier. Is there a motion to approve the establishment of the scholarship as presented?
So moved.
Oh, what's going on? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. And the last three items, items S, T, and U. So we have the combined teams applications for 24-25, Mid Lakes fundraisers and donations. Is there a motion to approve items S through U as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. All right. Personnel. Is there a motion to approve items A through D as presented? So appointments, substitute appointments, coaching appointments, and mentors. Items A through D. Is there a motion to approve those as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of items A through D as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. And items E through G, unpaid leaves, retirements, and resignations. Is there a motion to approve items E through G as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor of items E through G as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. And on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting for the purpose of entering into executive session to discuss matters leading to the employment and discipline of a particular person and contract negotiations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried.